Good morning and welcome to Blind Prog. That was, as everybody knows who's played 14, getting your static together is the hardest part of Savage. Finding a Thursday that everyone is free, ultimate. Now, unfortunately, before I have to go into this panel, one, please keep in mind everything I would say is not MAGFest's opinion, personal thoughts. This is all my own. My name is Sara Winters. I've been doing accessibility consulting for, oh God, about 20 years now. And Final Fantasy XIV is one of my favorite games, and it has a lot of both good and bad examples of blind accessibility and general accessibility in it. There's a lot of things it does right. There's a lot of things it still does very wrong. And because it's such a large game, it's a very good fodder for me to talk about accessibility. But unfortunately, with things that have happened in the past week, I have to address a very large elephant in the room because we are in the United States. And that is the fact, again, my opinions, not MAGFest. If this will go forward, this was a presidential decree as of Monday that DEIA is no longer allowed at the federal level. MAGFest is a nonprofit that works with federal companies. Technically, what I'm doing may be considered illegal. But here's the thing. You are someone you know is disabled. More than 1 out of every 10 people in the United States has some form of disability. You are someone you know is a gamer. I'm shocked. Shocking information. Over 60% of the United States games. And up from just 5 years ago, more than a third of people over the age of 50 game. As people get older, they're bringing their gaming habits with them. This is only going to increase over time. And disabilities are more likely to hit you when you age. Now, I was born legally blind, but a lot of people become blind and other forms of disabilities as they age. A lot of disabilities are correlated with age. A lot of forms of blindness are a side effect of another disability that happens when you get older. So by doing what's going on right now, why does it make financial sense to not be more open about diversity, equity, inclusion, and disabilities? If I'm not going to convince you on a good faith humanitarian argument, let me convince you with your wallet. Making things more accessible will make you more money. And I said this 7 years ago. This isn't new information. This isn't some kind of sudden thing that's happened. DI has always been in the room. And now let's actually start our presentation. So who am I? Why am I qualified to give this panel? On one hand, I am blind. On the other hand, I am in the top 5,000 globally in Final Fantasy XIV. I think that makes me qualified to give this panel. Thank you, LOL Achievements. I got that just before coming here, just to make that point. We are almost done with Sunrise. My static, please. They are doing it without me. If they clear while I'm gone, I will be very proud of them.
I believe in you.
Now, I do not work for Square Enix. I have never worked for Square Enix. I have never done any consulting for Square Enix. However, I do have one connection to them. If any of you are familiar with their LGBTQIA mascot, Mina, I named them. And yes, that is a signed print from the lead art creator of Final Fantasy IX, who sent it to me to thank for naming this wonderful being who I will protect with my life. Let me talk about what this panel isn't first. This panel is not a universal experience. I have ocular albinism, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. First off, can everyone hear me? Yes, okay. One, this is a panel about blind accessibility, and unfortunately, talking about that and that alone means talking about a lot of audio, because what is accessible for one group is not necessarily accessible for another, which means that this panel is very difficult to be accessible for deaf and hard of hearing people. However, I will be putting this up on YouTube with full captions and audio descriptions of all the images at a later date. That does take a lot of work. This kind of stuff that I'm doing for free does not pay my bills. If you are a company who's looking for accessibility training, executive orders notwithstanding, people like myself and many other people, like Steven Saylor, also does amazing blind accessibility work. You can hire us. Money can be exchanged for goods and services. Making games more accessible ultimately helps everyone. It is called the curb cut effect. You can check that extra credits video that I wrote 7 years ago. A lot of that information is still valid today. Everything that helps disabled people helps everyone. And I'll talk about why in a little bit. Yes, clap for that. More options are always better. Because if you don't need something, someone else will. My form of blindness means that bright lights are physically blinding to me. I can't see anything right now. This is just a room bathed in white. Put me in a dark room and I can actually see pretty well. I can't drive. When I am tested for my vision, I am put in a lightless room. That does not apply to everyone who has blindness, partial blindness, or visual impairments. It is a spectrum. It is across the board. I will be talking about my experience specifically, as well as some interviews I've done with other blind and visually impaired people generally. I will also not be doing a literary analysis of Final Fantasy XIV's blind characters, because there are enough to discuss that, and I did that last year here. What will I be talking about? This will be a more technical panel. As I explained before, I will be trying to minimize spoilers at all costs. We will be talking mechanics and UI only. If you want to talk to me about your opinions on Dawntrail, we can talk afterwards. And guess what? It just loaded on the screen. Perfect. So if someone can help me move this plug over, that would be great. Yes, feel free to get into frame. You will be famous forever. We have a main tank.
All
right, where does this go? Where does this bad boy go? All right, thank you. And I will be going to about 1:20 to compensate for the lateness. Can I get a hand to get this actually onto the right slide? I can't read the screen. I think I got it. Fingers crossed.
So that's the first page.
Yeah, I can see enough colors to know where I am on here. Come on, we've got it. Also, the art that's at the cover is a very good friend of mine. I made a video game last year. I do accessibility consulting, but I also am a designer. She did the art for a good portion of our game. It is free online. If you're interested, we can talk after. Yep, we're caught up. Yay. So what is blindness? Blindness is a spectrum. This isn't just some BS. This is true. It goes from cannot see anything whatsoever, lights, to some forms of visual acuity. I have 20 over 200 vision. What that essentially means is that if you stand 200 feet away from an object and you have 20/20 vision, and you look at that object and you see what you can see, maybe you can read a letter on it if it's really large, but not the rest. That is the visual acuity that I see something from 20 feet away. That's what those numbers mean. The bigger the first number, the worse your vision. So if you have 20 over 15 vision, what you see from 20 feet away is what someone with 20/20 vision sees from 15 feet away. Like I also said, I have ocular albinism. My version of blindness means that more light is worse. For a lot of people who have some form of vision, more light is often better. It depends on the person. Things that will work for me will not work for others and vice versa. That is why, say it with me, options are important. We're going to be coming back to that a lot in this talk. Color blindness is another form of blindness. And it's one that if any of you are familiar with much older games, what was the first option that we had? Before subtitles, before text sizes, the one visual option we often had was color blindness assistance. And do you know why that is? Assigned male at birth people are much more likely to be colorblind. That is correct. And when gaming first started, most people who were getting into gaming were assigned male at birth. So, because it was a problem that was directly affecting the people who were developing games, it was something that was addressed quickly. The only way to be able to address things for more people and therefore earn more money is to make sure that your developers are diverse, or to hire for gaps that you have in your development cycle. Because if you don't even know that it's a problem, you will never be able to fix it. So let's talk about basic UI and questing. We're going to start with if you have partial blindness into full blindness. So how do I see everything in game? It's called, you can make stuff really, really, really big. Unfortunately, when you launch 14 for the first time, it is quite small. I have sat down with many visually impaired people. It takes about an hour to set up somebody's UI how they want it. But a nice thing is, once you have that UI set and saved somewhere, like let's say they come over to my house and do it on my computer, and they've logged in and they save those settings. Those settings can then be saved and ported to their own device without needing a USB or any kind of device. It's a one and done deal. It is great. I have spoken with the lead UI developer at Square recently and begged, and I'm hoping he listens, but we'll find out, that there is an option to have a prepackaged my eyesight sucks option to have all of this stuff really big at start, and then if you need to shrink it back down because it's just too big, you can. But in all of these menus, and it does take a lot of menuing, the granularity is there. Each individual menu can be sized and resized as you need. There are gradients and scales aplenty. Unfortunately, because it starts small, you need someone who can see to get you set up in the first place. When I started playing for the first time, I had to have a sighted friend help me. So many UI options and menus. Just keeps going. I am showing about 15 different screens here of individual things you can change and modify. It is impressive. And again, this stuff was not designed for blind people in mind. This stuff most likely was designed because Final Fantasy XIV, when it was redesigned, was looking at WoW and saying, how can we do that? And while WoW base didn't start with this stuff, WoW is a big modders option. And mods put all of this in, and Square was like, we're going to be on a PlayStation. We need to have this at base. We can't expect people to mod. Again, I will not be talking about mods during this panel because I don't want to be followed by Square Enix in that way. This is all the stuff that you can do natively. But what if you can't see it all? How do you manage that? And unfortunately, there isn't an option in-game that can. I will be talking about something that is not a mod, but is something that I and other blind people use, and that's called JAWS. JAWS can read text in-game. There are other options nowadays. A lot of computers have a native version of this. Essentially, it is a system-wide screen reader. Now, here's the thing about Final Fantasy XIV. Everything, even things that you don't think are text, are stored as text and displayed natively without actually having to dig into code. If you put the correct things into your text box, they will be spat out as text. And what can a screen reader read? Text. So I've been talking to people about this. Well, JAWS has multiple voices. Native things have multiple voices. Do you know what is a commercially licensed voice pack product that you can use that is not AI that would be great to have? Yes, someone said Hatsune Miku. That's exactly. Imagine the Gaia speech in Hatsune Miku's voice. You can solve this problem without using AI. There are legal options that exist. Hatsune Miku and many other voice packs are you pay one price, you own it. Hatsune Miku is actually classified as a form of synthesizer. It is equivalent to your piano. That's why people make music with her, because they can, because they don't have to pay the owner of Hatsune Miku for every time the song is. That was the agreement, was Hatsune Miku is essentially a piano. It just talks instead of plays notes. And how do you interact with stuff? This is sighted or blind. I play on controller. Controllers have a great thing where whatever is closest to you physically is what you can target. So if 50 million people are surrounding an NPC before they updated it to make them invisible, just so that it was easier to click on, as if I click X, because I'm playing on a PlayStation controller. I used to play on a Steam controller. Unfortunately, they're discontinued. If anybody has one, I will pay for it. Again, accessibility. That weird controller is really good for people with certain kinds of disabilities. It is much more haptic and tactile than the PS5 controller. But pressing X means that no matter how many people are surrounding an NPC, I am immediately targeting the person I want to target, not some other player who's playing. Back when I was trying to buy a house in game, everybody remembers prior to the library, the market board spam. So essentially, in the olden days of Final Fantasy XIV, if you wanted to buy a house in game, you would have wait for a house to go up for sale, and you had to stand around it and click on a placard. And if you happened to click on it exactly when it went up for sale, because you didn't know exactly when, you could then put money down and buy it. So, actually roughly the same as buying a house in real life. Now it's a lottery system where you put the money down. If you win the house, the money is taken, you get the house. If you don't win it, you get your money back. But back then, market board spam was a real problem. If you were playing on mouse and keyboard, people could actually stand in front of the market board sign to prevent you from clicking on it. But on controller, that didn't matter. It would immediately know what the most important thing to you was, and you can set these preferences, and that's what you would click on. Macros are also great. If there's certain things that I have trouble doing, I can macro them. I don't tend to macro battle because I've memorized my keyboard layout, but for crafting and other things, fishing is a big one, where I need to figure out timing for things. I can write a script and assign it to a key as if it were a regular action and press that one button, and I don't have to type things out on the fly. It's great. Because I'm legally blind, I warn people when I enter dungeons. So I tend to hog the left side of the wall of the dungeon. I can hear the enemy mobs, and you'll be able to hear them in a moment too. And that's how I navigate spaces in Final Fantasy XIV. But that also means that I look like I'm a robot player sometimes. And if I don't warn people, and I didn't used to, sometimes people try to vote kick me because I'm not typing while I'm playing, because I'm listening and I'm on the controller. I don't have an access to a keyboard. So by having a macro that says, hello, I apologize, I do Savage Raid, but I am also blind, so I may act a little weird in the dungeon. Apologies. It does a lot of good just to have that little announcement before I play. And unlike any other multiplayer game I've played, I have had some flack for this, but the amount of times I've had issues with people like being upset that their tank or their healer is blind has been so few I can actually remember them. I will tell you, I have exactly 4 incidents in 7 years of things that I've had to report to Square Enix. It's impressive. Most people say nothing. A few people are curious and ask questions, and I'm like, if you're okay with me stopping for a second, I'll type. 4 incidents in 7 years is bananas. There is actually a very large blind and visually impaired community. Most of us tank and heal, and I'll get to why that is in a few minutes. So let's talk about sound toggles. So a very important thing is, what information is actually important? Is it playing the audio? Oh, the audio isn't plugged in.
You got it.
Could I get a hand? Because this should play noise. What?
Oh, one forward.
No, I can go back. I don't know what to do anyway. I think it's over here. Yep, try that. I'll make sure it works before I can step back down. Ooh, too far, too far. Come on. How to, panic. Okay. Is it just really quiet?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's there, but we're mostly getting static out here.
There we go.
Okay. Okay, so that is good volume. All right. It is supposed to be just quiet at certain points. So each of these individual...
Oh, it's not on screen now.
Current slide.
There it is.
Yeah, there we go. Hey! Unfortunately, I cannot read this computer. Give me a moment. I'm going to figure out why it's not playing in full mode. Oh, there it is. Hey! It works! So each individual thing. Now, as you're hearing, I'm turning the music up and down. For most of these, I will have the music off when we start going into sound effects. However, I play with the music on, and there's a reason for that. Starting with mid to late 2.0, which is the first major expansion, a lot of music syncs up to fights. So hearing the music itself also is an additional cue that helps me play. Again, what did I say earlier? Options are important. And being able to have that additional indicator, not just sound effects, but the music too. There are also, by the way, for those who are deaf and hard of hearing, visual indicators of certain sound effects. As someone who is legally blind, I don't know how effective they are, but I do know they exist in the game, and it is an option that you can try out. Oh, now it's work. Okay. So we're going to talk about the sound of combat. I'm going to fly through a little bit of this. I have some Final Fantasy terms up here on the board. They will be in the panel for those of you who are here more for the UI UX thing and don't know the specific terminology. But essentially, these are names of different types of attacks that I will be talking about throughout the panel. These will be explained in more detail in the YouTube video. I don't have time right now. Essentially, it's different types of attacks and the shape that they make on the floor, from an AoE, which is a circle or a square or a line that hits multiple targets depending on their size and shape, to a puddle, which is a specific type of AoE that goes underneath a player, and anyone else standing near that player can be damaged. There's also 3 main jobs in Final Fantasy XIV. And yes, they split into 21 specific individual jobs, but there's tank, the person who defends the party, healer, the person who heals. person who keeps people alive. Let's use Joe Cat's definition. Because as a healer, 90% of my job is dealing damage. And then there are the damage dealers who's supposed to be dealing damage, but often are on the floor. So I'm going to play some audio first without visuals of what this is. For those of you who play 14, those of you who don't sit and listen, those of you who play 14, I want you to shout out, where do you think we are? How many players do you think we are? What jobs do you hear and how do you know them? If you recognize anything, I want you to shout it out because you will be surprised at what you know without even being able to see any of the visuals. All right, close your eyes for a sec because I want to make sure I'm doing this right and the audio plays before the video does. Oh, it is. All right, I'm going to see if I can make the computer louder. Hang on. No, that's the computer sounds. All right, that is as loud as the computer goes. Let's see if that will help. Yeah, no, I did that on purpose. All right. I know, we're fighting against the band. Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah. So you guys were all right. You did miss a few things, but everything you did say was correct. It was an alliance raid for one, so you were hearing 24 people. If you need to get closer, please do. I promise we won't bite. No, this is Stormblood. This is objectively the best raid. Orban is pretty solid. Yeah, I have a master's in math. Oh no, dyscalculia. So the things that people detected, people heard the cards going off, they heard dance partner. You definitely mentioned Astro. Some other things that you might have heard was the jumping. The music was off on purpose. Normally you'd be able to tell right away from the sound of the music. But you guys definitely heard not just the stuff, but where they were relative to you. So Final Fantasy XIV uses what's called spatial audio. So all right, guesses on what those weapons were. What jobs are in the... First off, where are we? All right, more specifically, is this a dungeon, is this a trial, or is this an alliance raid? It was 4. It was a dungeon. So that's step 1. 2... I'll play the video in a moment. It's unsheathing and sheathing. So I can tell positionally where people are by where they are sheathing and unsheathing their weapons. Now the only thing is that both Scholar and Summoner have the same sheath and unsheath sounds because both of them use books. However, I am typically playing a tank or a healer. If I'm playing a healer and I hear the sound of a book, I am hearing a summoner. If I'm playing a tank and I hear the sound of a book, I have to use the context of the other two sounds that I'll hear to know if they're a summoner or a scholar. Because if I hear two sword sounds, I'm like, okay, I've got a samurai and maybe a ninja in my party. That book has to be my healer. I have to know where they are. But if I only hear one, and then I hear like the sort of like Gundam Wing-esque sound, I'm like, all right, I've got a sage and a summoner. I got to stick by the sage. So spatial sound is what is allowing me to navigate these dungeons and spaces. So again, I apologize for how low this thing is coming out, but there are sounds of footsteps, and those actually change based on what terrain we are standing on. Now I'm going to be on snow. You're going to hear a crystalline sound, and that's the sound of something that I'm like, oh, that's an enemy sound. That's going to be crystalline sound, and then a second sound, that's the drop. That's the sound of the attack actually going off. That's how I know how to navigate places when I can't see them. There's also a lot of debuffs. Do you hear the sound of that wind? When you're in the wind, you are taking continuous damage. I don't need to see the debuff list to know that I am in a bad spot right now. I can't see the debuff list. All I need to know is hear that wind sound. What is going on here? Why is it going ahead? Yeah, no, it's doing that automatically. Hear that wind sound. You are taking damage. You don't hear that wind sound, you are not taking damage. And for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, there is a visual debuff that has the little square with the arrow pointing down. By the way, for those of you who play 14, arrow pointing up, benefit. Arrow pointing down, deficit. Arrow pointing down with a white line, horizontal line on the top of it, is a deficit that you can Asuna. Yeah. Put Asuna on your hotbars. For people who don't play Final Fantasy XIV, and I'm speaking jargon, some of the bad things that happen to you, healers and bards can remove. If there's a white line on the bad thing, you can remove the bad thing. And you probably should. Unless it's that one Reaper in your static who doesn't get out of the bad stuff. You leave it on for an extra 2 seconds to send a message. Yeah. So we're going to be talking about standardized audio tells. So in addition to standardizing their visual tells in the end of Shadowbringers, which was now about 4 years ago, for those of you who hate the passage of time, audio tells were standardized as well, to the point where, again, options are important. If I hear a sound, it doesn't matter if I can see it or not, and if someone can see a thing but not necessarily hear it, those things are standardized. The difficulty in playing 14 is not the actual mechanics, it's the combination of them and playing with up to 23 other people, or if you're playing Baldessian Arsenal, over 50, at the same time. It's a coordination and dance type of problem, not a quick react problem. We are not playing a first-person shooter here. We are playing a cooperative game. So each of these kinds of mechanics have a specific and unique and distinct sound. So if you close your eyes, tell me where did that boss just raise from? Left. Yes. Top left. Leviathan was the very first fight to use spatial sound like this. When Leviathan falls and breaches, you don't need to actually be facing them. The audio will always be spatial to where your camera is facing, unless you're using legacy controls, then it's where your player is facing. And that's how you'll know how Leviathan is rising out of the water, to be able to dodge it. In normal, there's really no penalty, but in EX, when I was teaching people, when we did mine runs, guess who was the only one standing on the first run? Because everyone was used to normal and like, oh no, the water, oh no, we'll just get pushed to the side of the boat. Well, there is no side of the boat anymore. Even things that, like I mentioned before with the ice dropping, if I'm in the electricity, again, in the Evil East raids, I deliberately take a hit for you guys. You can hear where the electricity sound is the bad spot. If I was out of the AoE in time, that sound would have been cut off. So we're going to talk about different types of markers here. First is the sound of a stack marker. That means everybody group up. Then we have separate or puddles.
You gave me the strength to rise from the ashes.
That low whump, whump, whump means get away from anybody else. Single tank buster. This is a type of puddle that goes on the tank specifically. And you'll hear it's a very similar but not identical thwump sound to the separate because you're doing the same action. It's just aimed at a tank. So there is a standardized sound. It's kind of like, think of a good example off the cuff, but it's almost the same thing. It's like you've tasted one type of cupcake before and you see something that's vaguely muffin shaped. You know that it's going to be a baked good of some kind. And if you have celiacs, you know not to touch both of them unless somebody tells you, hey, no, this is celiac free. You're the tank, you take care of this. Now, a multi-tank buster. Now, remember, this is a tank buster for more than one tank. So if a tank buster uses a sound similar to a puddle or a separate, and a stacking mechanic uses a specific sound, what does a multi-tank buster sound like when you're dealing with a multiple mechanic like this? It sounds like a combination of a puddle and a stack. So you get the high-pitched whoosh sound of stacking and the low-pitched whump sound of separating. And as someone who can't see, if I hear that and I am a tank, I run towards it. If I'm not a tank, I get the heck out. There's other sounds too. Almost every mechanic that is now considered standardized has a sound. Here's an acceleration bomb. That means that when the sound stops, you stop moving. This is basically musical chairs on steroids. Because if you fail, you get yeeted into the stratosphere. You get a 3, 2, 1, and then a final light sound. That's your cue to stop moving. And even for mechanics that are unique to a fight, there is usually some kind of audio indicator, either in the positive or the negative, like, doop, you've done this correctly, or you've done this wrong, to know that even if I don't know what this mechanic is yet, and I'm going to talk about how we learn mechanics as blind people, that I know that I've at least attempted this mechanic and done so correctly, or I gotta try again. So when you hear that whoosh sound, that means, in this case, we had to face a specific direction. A lot of people call this mechanic DDR. If you faced the right way, there is a positive indication in the form of that whoosh sound that I have done the mechanic right. I don't need to be able to see it. I just need to listen for that whoosh. I can rotate my camera, my character like rotating something in the microwave, and when the microwave dings, I'm good to go. Finally, we have barks. Bark is a term in voice acting that refers to a short phrase. This short phrase is short, consistent, and clear, and it tells you when when I say this thing, something's going to happen. What that something is going to depend on the fight, and that's when you have to learn, because Final Fantasy XIV is about learning what these things mean. But in this case, behold the virtuosity of the builder. The first time we played this, people who could see that there were lines on the sides of the arena. I did not. But what I did know is the minute that he finished saying that line, the sides of the arena fell off, and if I was there, I was dead. So now I know, if I hear behold the virtuosity of the builder, well, I can immediately go to this boss, stand under him, and I know that I'm not on the edge of the arena. I am safe, and I will not be harmed. Barks are very common in 14 for unusual mechanics that they don't have a standardization for. It's a lot easier to remember very memorable phrases. I think everyone in here who's played knows, "For all amigo!" and exactly what that means when you have to do that fight. Wait for it. Wait for it. But the fact that these are memeable means that they are memorable. So we're actually going to go through what does it mean to do a fight on day one blind, and I mean actually blind. So it's launch day. It is 6.3. We are going into the brand new raid. We are going to learn some mechanics for the first time, and we can't see a gosh darn thing. I got my crew ready. We got our bosses on the other side of the arena. We are ready to fight. But, let's simplify things a little bit. No, I don't think that's right. There we go. Look at that brand new graphics update. For my fellow friends who are completely blind, I have literally just drawn 2 circles on a square. We are going to be talking about this in the simplest terms possible because what's important is the audio. The visuals here are just for the people who aren't used to doing audio only. You visuals only people. But wait, no, this isn't quite right because we're missing something here. This is 24 on 2. Now it's right. So I've added the additional 24 players. The circles are our tanks, the triangles are our healers, the squares are our DPS, and suddenly something happens. We hear a whoosh sound, and there's a line between 2 bosses. Now, this is 6.3. Even if some people are new to the game, they've at least had to play through 2, 3, 4, and 5 to get to this point. There are certain mechanics we all know. And when we hear a whoosh sound between 2 bosses, and for people who can see a link, that means one thing. These bosses need to be separated because as long as they are close enough to each other, they're either going to buff each other's attack to the point where it will hurt us, or they will prevent us from doing any damage to them. Or in the case of the 5.5, they will hurt us if they're attached to each other. So the tanks immediately, one of them grabs one grabs the other, and separates them. And then you've got your black mage in the bottom corner deciding to do his own thing. There are ley lines there. They are not moving. Typically, with these kinds of fights, now that people have learned, everyone else should stand in the middle and, attack both the bosses with the bosses being turned away from one another. This is stuff we've learned. So, of course, I've drawn out some lines of characters facing different bosses, who they're facing, and who they're attacking.
I will spin your face.
And then we hear that. And it's a female voice saying, "I will spin your fates," and a countdown happening. Now, those of us who are familiar with countdowns are like, this must be Acceleration Bomb. We should stop moving. Again, this is day 1 when nobody knows what mechanics are. We're gonna learn something today. But that's the first thought of any raider's head is, this mechanic sounds like something I've done before. Let's try doing that and see what happens. So, we hear a whoop sound. Uh-oh, that's a sound we've heard before. That is the sound of charmed, which means if you look at the thing, you are going to have a lot of bad times. So anybody who happened to be looking at that boss, their player character physically facing them, has suddenly taken damage. Okay, now we know there is a countdown timer. So this is actually really easy, right? There's a countdown timer. At the end, you do not look at the boss who says the thing. You physically face your character away from it. Everything will be fine. Remember what I said about Final Fantasy XIV's difficulty is in mixing mechanics and dealing with other people?
Have you the strength to defy fate?
Okay, we've heard that same mechanic now. Now everybody is on the game. They've heard her talk. There's going to be a countdown, and then you need to look away from her.
The sands of time are mine to command.
Except that the other boss has suddenly said, time is mine to command, and a very fast ticking noise. Okay, so this is just going to happen faster now. Right? Like, how fast is fast? It's instant. So people who thought they'd have a full 8 seconds to still do some damage to the female character, no. Ow. So, okay, now we get it. First character's thing is being charmed. The second character's thing is messing with time. We've got this. We know what we're doing, right? Third time around, we're not going to get hit. This time, there's no audio. There is just the countdown noise. But then at the very end, did you hear that little high-pitched whine? At the very end of that countdown, there was a very slight high-pitched whine. I'll play it for you again, because I was talking over it. There, that chime. That was not in any of the other ones. And in 14, those sounds mean something. If you were looking at it visually, this character has cards over their head that they are drawing, and the attack finishes when it fades at times with the sound effects. But here's the thing, that high-pitched whine is accompanied by the card spinning upside down. Yeah. So for me, who can't see, I hear a whine, I'm like, something is going to be different here. People who are visual will see a card spinning. But what does that mean? All right, well, all of us now have learned our lesson. Do not look at her when the timer finishes because things will be bad. Except for this black mage who really, really, really likes her. Because, man, those pixels. It's going. The other boss did not give a timer, so it is going slowly. There's the anticipation. And everyone took damage except for the black mage. What happened? What happened was that high-pitched whine / card turning upside down, we've learned our lesson again. There's 3 things that could happen. There is the attack goes off and the other person interrupts so it's suddenly fast, or the attack goes off in reverse. And what's the reverse at looking at something? You're looking away from something. All right. We've got this.
Bear witness to the keeper's might.
Okay. 4th time around. It's going fast. We've heard it. Did we hear that high-pitched whine? No. And how would you resolve this mechanic? Who would you be facing? Pink is Pink is the one talking. Did we hear the high-pitched whine? No, we did not. So we would be everybody looks at orange and looks how fast? Very fast. Okay, it is now 6:50 in the morning. I have class, I've work in an hour, but I think I have time for one more raid on day 1 because I was up at 5 when it's rolled over because I really wanted to do it. We have learned our lesson. Everyone is grouped up around orange because one thing we learned is they share HP. As long as you kill one, the other one goes down almost immediately. Everyone's grouped up around orange because we learned it's going to be looking away from her unless we hear that whine, and it never happens first. Let's go. And we have one machinist in the top right corner who does not care. I will spin your fates. We hear the sound. We are ready to go. Everyone is looking away from her, focused on the other boss. We are doing fine. Long timer. That was not the sound of charm. That's the sound of ice. And again, this is a mechanic that individual mechanic is pulled over from old Final Fantasy XIV. I'm watching my time because I have 15 minutes left because I went over. That's ice. Ice means stop moving. So all of us are doing damage. No, it's fire. Sorry, that's the fire sound. Ice means stop moving. We all took damage. Okay, now we know something though. If it's fire, what's the opposite of fire? Ice. Ice is if fire is don't move. What is ice? Keep moving. Okay, this is going to be a time-based and opposites-based mechanic. So now we have multiple things to remember. Who is speaking in what order, and then what was the first mechanic done? So how is I, as a blind person who's going to do this for the first time in a brand new raid, if this is going to be randomized, I stand at orange and I stop moving when the cast happens. It doesn't matter which one it's going to be. I will know after it happens by the sound of charm or fire, and that's going to be the same for the rest of the fight. That is how I, as a blind person, do all of mechanics in 14. Here is that fight. No visuals now. Okay. Fast or slow? Slow. Did you hear the high-pitched whine? Yes, so it's going to be opposite. And everyone does the mechanic correctly. We are now going to be talking about some changes since Endwalker. Again, no spoilers here. I will be as vague as possible. But Endwalker had a lot of stealth sessions. Again, I'm not going to talk specifics. Stealth sections are a problem because we're going to be talking about combat loops here. Every video game has a gameplay loop, the core thing that you do in that game to move forward. Stealth is not a gameplay loop in 14. I'm not saying don't include it, but understand the people that are coming to 14 to play 14 are not coming for stealth. Having options and the changes that were made to provide additional information, by the way, in the form that we are used to seeing and hearing, the separate marker and sound now follows stealth markers. Now, a lot of people are like, this is immersion breaking. I agree. This should have been a toggle. This should have been an option to turn this on or off. This is only available on now. It should have been an option, but the fact that this is here rather than not is always preferred. I would rather break immersion and when you're doing something not in your core gameplay loop than block people off from story completely. Last year in my talk and way earlier in a written essay that I sent to Square, I had complaints about Y'shtola and how she was handled in Final Fantasy XIV. They included an amazing blind character in Dawntrail. You may not even run into her. She's a minor NPC, But all the complaints that I had last year about how animation was handled with the Y'shtola, about how she can read books when she is fully blind, and not Braille books. Like, the excuse is, I can see ether. I'm sorry, but then she's not blind. If you can read regular books at regular print size without any assistance, you don't have vision issues. But they've given us, like, again, minor character, someone you, like, and her being blind is not a story point. It means nothing to the story. It's just, you happen to meet a minor who is blind, and she's in the story somewhere. And the really wild thing is, they went and animated her like a blind person. I used to work at a school for the blind that handled people with vision like mine, people who had no vision, people who had just like visuals. I'm comparing now the way when you walk up to an NPC, the NPC will follow your gaze. If you walk up to this blind NPC, she will not. She is the only one in the game programmed this way. If you go up and talk to her, she will not look you in the eye because, well, where is your eyes relative to her? She will talk to you. She will turn her head in your direction, but she will not turn her head up and down to face you in the eye like any other character in the game will. It's such a small thing, but it was just so cool to see. Representation matters. We exist. We're here. We will always be here. And the fact that this was added in with no fanfare was just so nice. Didn't need to be here, and it is. And here I will end with some problems.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Chicken.
No sound in space. Why are there no audio cues in the capstone trial for 6.0? There aren't any. There are 0 audio cues there. The excuse, like, sound, there, no sound in space shouldn't be a cue. Then why is there music? No, there is just straight up bombastic, amazing music and no audio cues for any attacks in that fight. Yeah, now that I've pointed it out, I had to be carried through it. Not because I can't play. I play Savage, darn it, and I could not do that fight. The 6.3 dungeon, several people with visual impairments that involve screen shake have complained about this. Make it an option. This is an MSQ dungeon. Everyone has to go through it. I am less miffed about things like jumping puzzles that require visual acuity because you don't need to do them to complete MSQ. They are an optional, difficult side quest. I am fine with those. I am okay with not being able to do everything in this game. But if I can't complete MSQ, then why am I here? And finally, alarms. This is something that was added in 7.0, and it drives me up a wall, and I have complained about this endlessly. They added an alarm system where it's text accompanied by an alarm. Here's the problem with alarms. They always use the same sound, but they never mean the same thing. Nine times in a 12-minute fight does this sound occur, and in each of those 9 times, it means an entirely different mechanic. And here's the kicker. That sound is covering up the sound that is actually in the game that tells me what the mechanic is. Because after the first time you do it, the second time there is no mechanic sound. And it gives me the wind sound, which tells me to go in. That is a consistent sound in 14. That ding is covering up the actual piece of information I need to use to do this fight. In conclusion, Final Fantasy XIV is accessible about 90% of the time, but that 10% is killer, and it can be game-stopping for people. And it's very simple things that could be toggles that you can turn on and off. They did it with the stealth, they can do it with these. Those are non-gameplay loop-related items that can be fixed. Look at your pain points in your own games and see where they are. Play test, play test, play test. Because that sort of problem that we just talked about with Volley Garmanda is what's called as alarm fatigue. When everything sounds the same and sounds equally important, suddenly none of it is. It's the same problem that you have in hospitals. That's where that term was coined. And I want to take a moment to thank everybody because about 100 people helped me record footage for this. We have gone way over. If you have questions, comments, want a badge ribbon from me, I'm the one giving out the Graha Taco ribbons. Please come and find me just outside and have a wonderful rest of your MAGFest.